Hey guys, Ryan here from Instructions Not Included, and today is a great episode because I actually interview another startup founder. This guy's name's Varun, and he started a company called Lully or Lully, depending on how you pronounce it, tomato, tomato. But this is a really cool company. They solved the problem of night terrors in young children. Now, if you don't know what a night terror is, then consider yourself lucky. A night terror happens when your child, well, they wake up, but they don't actually wake up, and generally it results in them having a tantrum, but they're not actually awake. And so you can't console your child, you can't fix the tantrum, and often when you go to try and help them or, hold them down to stop them hurting themselves or something, they don't respond to you, and in fact they get worse. So night terrors are a really serious issue for parents because it's very traumatic. As a parent, I have a child who gets night terrors. It's very traumatic as a parent to watch your child go through these traumas, to go through these nightmares where they don't wake up, but there's nothing you can do about it. And so Varun created a company with his co-founders that solved this problem. And basically they created a product which is like this disc that goes under your child's bed and vibrates along with software. It's an app on your phone that tells you when to turn it on. And we talk about how they started the company, a whole bunch of stuff around night terrors, and how they ended up going through and getting this product created. So this was someone that I really wanted to interview because I really love this product. It solved the problem of night terrors for my child, and I hope that by creating this, some people out there will learn about night terrors and learn about how to fix it for their children as well. So here's the interview with Varun from lullysleep.com. My kid had night terrors, and I actually found out about you through This Week in Startups. Do you listen to that podcast at all? Jason Calacanis?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so anyway, he was interviewing like a VC, and they were talking about, oh yeah, we invested in this company that helps people whose kids wake up screaming in the night. And I was like, oh my God, that's like my kid. I didn't even know what a night terror was. And then I heard that, and so I went on a Google spree to find you, and because they had mentioned, oh, they were from MIT or something. So then I'm Googling MIT night terrors. Eventually I found it, and I was able to get one and ship it out to me. But how did you work out, or how did you even start to think oh, I know, we'll deal with this issue that's night terrors, and we'll just put a vibrating disc under kids' beds, and that'll fix the problem? Because there seems to be no other solution out there. It's just a random solution. What happened?
Yes. So stepping back a little bit, it sort of started because my co-founder grew up with a sister who had night terrors, and more recently his nephew had started experiencing night terrors. And both of us were at Stanford at the time doing a healthcare innovation fellowship. So it's a program that essentially helps you find ideas worth solving, and a lot of the times it results in companies being spun out. So anyway, so we met as a part of that program, and he brought up night terrors and as an interesting area, and he's a clinician by training, and it was sort of an interesting insight where the clinical community looked at night terrors and really thought they were benign. They're something that kids will eventually grow out of. No one's there are really no terrible adverse outcomes from night terrors, and so the clinical community had said it's not a problem. But in reality, for a parent dealing with night terrors, and especially a family with consistent night terrors, it's pretty draining, and it's pretty emotional to see a child in that state. So as we were looking at the problem, we thought it's something that definitely warrants solving. So that's sort of how we got started working on night terrors.
Yeah, I think that's that's interesting because night terror, for people who don't know, is your kid wakes up screaming in the night, sometimes throwing a tantrum, but they're not actually awake. And if you try and console them and try and calm them down, usually it makes things worse. Super frustrating as a parent because there's nothing you can do. But I can see clinically why like people have ignored it, because like my child doesn't even remember having them like in the morning. So like it's really stressful as a parent, but then as a child, like I don't even know if it registers for them that these things are happening.
Exactly, and so the kid doesn't know, and I think another part of it is pediatricians really didn't have a tool. So if they did start saying night terrors was a problem, their hands are still tied because they can't really offer you a solution to it. So part of it is that playing out as well.
Yeah. So do we know what causes night terrors? Like why does this happen?
Yeah, so we don't know exactly what causes night terrors. Um, when you do overnight sleep studies or polysomnograms with children who experience night terrors, they tend to have a lot more sort of spontaneous partial awakenings from their deep sleep, and a lot more frequently than other children.
So does this mean like they don't have a standard sleep cycle where they go into REM sleep and then come out and go back in?
So overall, their sleep architecture remains the same, but most kids, they'd go in a deep sleep. During a continuous period of deep sleep, they may partially awaken once or twice, very, very briefly, but they're in deep sleep for the majority of that time. Children who have night terrors have multiple, significantly more of these partial awakenings from their deep sleep. And what people believe is those are triggers of night terrors.
So what is a partial awakening? Is that like when you kind of wake up and you roll over and pull the covers on yourself or something, like those sort of moments?
That's one type of partial awakening. So the clinical definition of a partial awakening, a non-sustained awakening, is I believe it's less than 3 seconds. There's no recollection of the event in the morning. So you may do something that you typically do when you're awake, like, roll over and pull the covers over, but you really haven't fully woken up from sleep and you really don't remember ever doing it. With night terrors, what tends to happen is during some of those partial awakenings, the brain enters a dissociative state. And what that means is part of the brain is awake while the rest of it's asleep. And with night terrors, the part that's responsible for motor activity is awake, but the parts of the brain that are responsible for processing external stimuli and for laying down memories is asleep. So they act like they're awake, but they can't process any input. So if you're trying to hold them, you're trying to trying to control what they're doing, trying to keep them in bed, they tend to fight you off.
Yeah. So why does it result in a tantrum? So like they can move around, but they can't respond to input. So they don't know you're there, or they don't know that someone's touching them or something. Why does that result? Why is a night terror not just like the kid walks up, like stands up and walks around the room or something? Like why is it so severe in terms of a tantrum?
Yeah. So it's interesting. So we've gotten a couple of questions along that vein. So one is, there are actually a spectrum of sleep disorders called disorders of arousal, and night terrors is probably the most intense. And then the middle of the road is sleepwalking. So it's your child still appears to be awake. They walk around the room, but there's no yelling, there's no screaming, there's no crying. And the mildest form of disorders of arousal is called confusional arousal. So your child usually is still in bed. They may mumble a little bit. They'll toss and turn. They may moan a little bit, but
Is this like sleep talking?
Yeah, a little bit. And so they all fall under the same umbrella of sleep disorders, and they're all tied to the same dissociative state in the brain. So they're all very, very similar.
So with Lully, so it's a vibrating disc under your bed that you as a parent turn on at a certain point in time. You get like an app on your iPhone that connects to it, and you turn it on and it vibrates for 3 minutes, or you turn it off when your kid starts moving. How did you guys come up with the idea, well, like, let's use vibration to interrupt like a sleep pattern? Like, I think it's genius because I don't have to medicate my child. Like, I hardly have to do anything. Like, I let the app know when my kid goes to bed, and then it notifies me and says it's time for Lully, and I do it when it's time, and that's all I have to do. Like, how did you come up with the idea, like, let's skip medication, let's just try like vibration? Did you try like a bunch of things, or was it just...
Yeah, so there's sort of two parts to it. So one is, so the program we were in at Stanford called Biodesign, it teaches a very specific philosophy to innovation, and it's you really identify the problem that you're trying to solve, and then you build a set of criteria that a solution to that problem needs to meet.
Okay.
And this is way before you even start thinking about whether you can solve the problem or not, or how you're going to solve it.
So you just say, here's our problem. In order for this problem to meet, we need to meet certain criteria, and that's kind of how you start.
Exactly. And so one of our most important criteria was it shouldn't be drug-based. And so criteria like that are things we gather talking to customers. So we talk to moms and dads who are dealing with night terrors and try to understand what are the most important aspects that a solution needs to meet for it to be adopted by a parent dealing with this problem. And so it not being something that was drug-based was really important. It not being something that interrupted with sleep routine or the sleep environment was really important. It not being something that they'd have to wear was important from a compliance standpoint. So we put together this list of 8 to 10 requirements that are really important for a solution to meet. So that's sort of phase one of coming up with a solution. And then phase two was really clinical research driven. So spent a lot of time looking back at early literature about night terrors, and honestly, there isn't a lot about night terrors. But
yeah, well, it must be hard if it's like clinically they think it's benign, so let's not worry about it.
So no one wants to study it. No one gives you a grant to study night terrors. So, but we did find a handful of papers. They were just case reports, so 2-3 kids being studied back in the 80s. And some clinicians describing a technique called scheduled awakenings, where they suggested keeping a track of your child's night terrors, and then walking into the room at some point at night, fully waking up your child, keeping them up for 5 minutes, and then putting them back to bed. And it was a small sample size in terms of clinical studies, but the results look really compelling. I mean, these were families that were dealing with night terrors for years on end, and all of a sudden they do this for a couple of weeks, and in 12 months of follow-up, these children didn't have their night terrors come back. Was this
something the parents would do every night?
Yeah, so it was parents would do it every night for up to 7 weeks. So there was some clinical data which said, hey, there's something about interrupting sleep cycles that looks like it may make sense. So that was sort of data point number one. The second was we were at Stanford, and we were really lucky to be at Stanford, which is because sleep medicine as a field was created at Stanford by Bill Dement and Christiane Guilleminault back in the 60s and 70s, and Dr. Guilleminault still practices there. So we went and started working with him, and he's sort of a walking encyclopedia about sleep. And so we'd just, like, we'd walk into his office on a Friday afternoon and just rattle off questions, and he'd just answer them off the top of his head.
So it's like Google, but for like sleep disorders and stuff.
Very specific space, which is fabulous. And we were also lucky because there was a clinician from the University of Minnesota who used to come to Stanford once a month only to run their parasomnia clinic. And night terrors are considered a parasomnia. So he's someone who's being invited to Stanford only to run a parasomnia clinic because he's one of the best in the world. So we had tremendous resources at Stanford to clinicians who understood what was going on. And then the third bit was talking to pediatricians, talking to the sleep community about why scheduled awakenings hadn't caught on. I mean, the data looked so
that's
compelling.
what I'm thinking. Like, if it was done in the 80s, why has no one picked up on it?
Yeah, so no one practiced it. And so that was always curious for us. And what we learned through talking to both clinicians who recommended it and parents who had tried it was your clinician would talk to you about scheduled awakening in a 15-minute appointment and tell you, keep a track of your child's night terrors, and then at some point before that, go into the room and wake your child up. So this has a bunch of problems once you get back home. One, you never know when you should be when you should be waking up your child, because no one really told you when to wake up your child. The second is you're breaking a cardinal rule of parenting, which is wake up your child once you put them to bed.
Yeah, never wake a sleeping baby. Isn't that the rule?
Exactly. So compliance was you're stuck as a parent with not having enough information to implement it and being really worried about implementing it because it took you an hour to put your child to bed and now they're telling you to wake them up. So we sort of looked at that and said compliance, education, automation, and awakening were the big problems with scheduled awakening as a therapy as it existed. And we looked at, can all of this be automated? And technology is a great way to automate things that have compliance problems. Yeah, so and technology is a great place when you have a compliance problem. And so we looked at this entire problem and said, okay, is there a way to reduce this this technique to something that can be taken home with someone and implemented without really needing to know anything more than put this under your child's bed and start using it. So that's sort of how we learned about this being an effective solution, and started defining and designing the product. This is a long-winded answer to your original question of how we thought about the vibrating pod under the bed, and it sort of came back to some of those really important criteria that we set out for a solution. So we wanted it to be something that wasn't wearable and outside of didn't disturb the environment of the bed, didn't disturb bedtime routine, which is why it went under the bed. We also learned that about 40% of children share a bedroom with a sibling.
Yep. Which is true. That's true for my children. They share a bedroom. Okay.
Yeah. And so we didn't want, if you think of other ways to partially awaken a child, it's light, sound, vibrations, and light and sound could potentially wake up someone else in the room as well, whereas vibrations is very personalized. And so we picked that as an intervention mechanism.
So was your original goal that we'll use these vibrations to actually wake the child up?
So that was the other key bit that we learned working with the clinicians at Stanford. So a big hypothesis we had was all the studies previously had said you have to wake up your child and keep them awake for 3 to 5 minutes. And we said if that was required, we couldn't productize this. Yeah. No one's going to do that. So we instead tried to understand why waking up your child worked. And the reason was it sort of resets the sleep cycle. It gets the entire brain into the same state so that you don't end up with part of the brain being awake and part of it being asleep.
Okay.
So we sort of speculated.
Is that because the whole brain wakes up, or just does it take you out of REM sleep and put you back to the start of the sleep cycle? What does it do?
Right. So when you wake up someone, you take them out of whatever stage of sleep they're in. You bring the brain entirely to the awake state, and then if they nod back off, they'd go into light sleep and back into deep sleep.
Yeah.
So that's why fully waking them up works. we were looking at whether we could do the same thing without fully waking up someone. And so we came up with this concept of partial awakenings where you get the child, you bring them very, very briefly out of the deep sleep stage that they're in, but don't keep them in the awake state long enough that they fully wake up.
Yep.
But let the body go back to sleep. And so as soon as what the vibrations does is very briefly bring them out of deep sleep. And as soon as the brain sees that trigger, it tries to put the child back to sleep.
Okay.
And without ever letting them fully wake up. And that was sort of a critical insight for us to be able to translate this technique into something that's actually a product. So it was a hypothesis that we came up with while we were still at Stanford, and then we ran a scientific study to validate it. So we had children who had night terrors enroll in the study, and we practiced this partial awakenings technique on them for a period of 3 to 7 weeks, and saw comparable results to what was published in the previous studies back from the 80s.
Yeah.
So that was sort of our aha moment of, okay, we know how to build a device that doesn't wake up a child, but is enough to reset their sleep cycle. We can do it from under the mattress without perturbing their sleep and without interfering with their sleep. Now we have something that's met all the criteria that we initially set out.
Yeah, that's awesome. And can I ask you, like sometimes when I do the Lully, my child doesn't move, so it goes for the 3 minutes and they don't move at all. Does that mean they're not like getting that partial awakening, or are they still getting it, but their body's not responding?
Yeah. So yes. So it's the latter, because the brain can still be activated and have a partial awakening without the physical manifestation of a movement.
Okay.
But without having a bunch of leads on a kid's head, you really can't pick those up. So we rely on, when we see a movement, there's a guarantee of a partial awakening. But once the vibrations are on, there could be a partial awakening that doesn't result in a movement.
Okay. So this is so good for me to know because, yeah, like I was thinking, it makes so much sense now why you turn the vibrations off once your child starts moving, because they've obviously achieved that partial awakening state. I didn't know that. I didn't know, like, why do you turn it off when they've started moving? I thought it was just so you didn't wake them up fully. So yeah, like that's cool to know.
That's a good point. That's probably something we need to spend some time educating our users about.
Well, that's like the thing. Like the way it happened for me was like my child would only have night terrors like maybe like once a week or twice a week to once a month. Like it really varied. And so it wasn't, we didn't really know what it was. Like we didn't know what a night terror was. We didn't even know we really had a problem. We just had a kid who woke up screaming who you couldn't like fix. And like we would fix it. We would have to put on a TV show like Peppa Pig and like get him, like wake him up to get him out of that state. So like that was a solution we had come up with. And it wasn't until I heard about, oh, there's this startup company that's done this thing that I was like, oh my goodness, that's the problem that we have. Like I didn't know. So like, so you did all the studies, you came up with the idea. Talk to me about like how hard was it to start a company like this and to get a product created to be able to sell it? Like I sell information products, but I've never had to create something physical.
Yeah, it comes with definitely its own set of challenges. And today all physical products have a software component. So I almost feel like we're taking on the challenges of both the software and the hardware world when you build physical products these days. So it's definitely a journey. It takes a lot longer to develop physical products. So rewinding the clock a little bit. So we wrapped up at Stanford June, July last year. We spent the rest of the year doing our clinical study to show that what we claimed was an effective way to help with night terrors was in fact effective.
Is this so you
Um,
could market the product as effective for night terrors? Because otherwise it could
it was
potentially
a
be.
combination. It sort of had three different reasons for doing that. One was to prove to ourselves that this was a product worth developing,
Yeah.
and it actually solved the problem we were going after.
Yeah, it's not
Um,
snake oil or something that you
right,
just think it
exactly.
helps, but it doesn't actually.
Right, exactly. And so that, as a company, as founders, was really important to us. The second was to be able to make the claims that we do. We needed to have data backing it up. And then the third, honestly, was to get investor buy-in. We were talking about a problem that isn't talked about a lot, and talking about a solution to a problem that hadn't ever existed. So there was definitely skepticism behind both whether this problem really existed and whether this problem could be solved the way we claimed it could be. So that clinical study was definitely played a very big part in getting us across that hurdle.
Yeah.
So we raised a little bit of money towards the end of 2014, and we're fortunate enough to apply and get accepted in Y Combinator, which is Bay Area-based accelerator, incubator, and now fund.
Yeah, I didn't know you guys were in YC. That's cool.
Yeah, we were in winter 15.
Okay, cool. Yeah. And then to get the product made, did you guys do, because I think I pre-purchased the product, or you had sold out and I purchased it before the next run. Did you go through YC and then do a Kickstarter or something like that to get it funded to create it?
Yeah, so we didn't go down the Kickstarter approach because this really was a problem that parents wanted solved today.
Yeah.
And not 9 months from today.
Totally.
And so it felt like something we needed, when we took someone's money, we needed to promise them a solution to it.
Yeah.
So what we did, we sort of did it in two parts. During YC, we did 100 family beta. This was to show that we could put a product in the hand of the lay consumer and they could use it and see comparable results to our clinical study.
Yeah.
So that was a 100-person beta we did. And then starting July this year, we started selling the full commercial product.
Yeah, I think that's when I bought it, was in July, or maybe even a little bit before that. I don't know if you did a pre-sale. Did you?
Yeah. So we were taking pre-sales before our launch for a couple of weeks. That's right.
Okay, so I got in on the official launch, did I?
Yeah, you did.
Awesome.
You're an early adopter.
Yeah, well, the reason that I committed was just the sheer fact that there's nothing out there. Once I realized I had this problem, you do some Googling about it, and really there's no solution out there that's this is actually going to fix my problem. And then I think it was your sales video as well, when I saw the parents' experience in that sales video. It's your kid isn't waking up, and when you said you try and help them and they get worse, I'm like, yes, that is me. And I'm like, if this is going to cost me a couple of $100 in terms of Australian money, then yeah, that's totally worth it for me. It's so funny, as a parent, you're willing to spend money on this, even though your child doesn't remember it and your child's going to grow out of it. Such a traumatic experience that you're I will pay almost anything to not have to deal with this. It's just too much.
Right. Honestly, it's a combination of the trauma, the unknown, the heartbreak, and the sleep deprivation. We have families that have 3-4 night terrors a night, and it's been going on for 3 years, and I don't know how they're functional.
Yeah, I can't imagine doing that. I had one every week or so, and that was hard enough. I can't imagine having a couple a night.
Right, and it's hard to deal with as a parent. Each one is really hard.
Yeah. So what do you guys think your plans will be from here? Is it just really get more distribution of the product and get it out there?
Yeah. So right now we're definitely focused on getting the product out there. helping as many families as we can, both in terms of educating them about night terrors, and then offering a solution if that's warranted. But ultimately, our goal as a company is to be the children's sleep company.
Okay.
One of the things that struck us as really odd, or maybe struck us as a really good opportunity, was the fact that technology had helped parents in so many different ways, and it helped make parenting so much easier. But the one guarantee as a parent today is you're going to be sleep deprived for the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah,
And
that's true.
was sort of shocking.
Yeah, I've got 3 kids at the moment, and I've got a 6-month-old
Okay.
who's sick at the moment, and he is up like all night with sickness, and like, yeah, I'm very sleep deprived.
Yeah, so it was sort of shocking to us that in today's day and age, with all the technology we have, that was an area that hadn't seen much improvement, and saw an opportunity to come at it from the medical, the clinical, the scientific side of things, versus a lot of products in the children and baby space are more consumer-driven products.
Yeah, like toys and colorful things and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Or cots and beds and that sort of stuff. Yeah.
Right.
I know. I'm in it. I've been buying lots of that sort of stuff. And okay, so I'm guessing one thing, like when I shared this with like my friends and stuff like that, one of the things that I was asked, I've got a friend who has, I can't remember what the condition's called, but they like they have nightmares, but while they're awake and they can't move their body. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh, sleep paralysis?
Yes, sleep paralysis. I was just wondering, like, can something like this or something you guys work on, will that ever help with sleep paralysis? Because that seems like another one of those things that there's just no solution and it's just like really bad.
Yeah, and that's really scary for the kids themselves, because in sleep paralysis, you're actually fully awake and you know what's going on and you have memory of the event. So
it kind of sounds like the opposite to night terrors. Like night terrors, your motor function works, but you're not awake.
Right.
Yeah, so they were asking me, they're like, can Lully, like, can it be used for sleep paralysis? I'm guessing the answer is no, but
yeah, not the product we have. So the product we have on market right now is really for night terrors. But as we work through our product pipeline and get more and more products out there that are able to help with sleep, hopefully one day we're able to find a way to solve sleep paralysis.
So are you able to tell me like what other problems you are working on in terms of what other sleep issues?
I can say broadly that it's still within the infant, toddler, preschooler sleep space.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I can get necessarily into much more detail, but we're staying very focused. We're not going into the adult sleep space. We're not going into the clinical sleep space. We're sort of focused at helping babies, infants, toddlers sleep better.
Cool. Well, I'll definitely be monitoring you guys and finding what's coming next, because I've still got toddlers and I've still got young kids. So, and that's the thing, like I never knew I had a problem. And so if you're saying like the things that you're creating can help parents with sleep deprivation, dude, I am all on board with that. That sounds great for me. I've been running off like 4 hours sleep a night sort of thing for this week because I've got a sick kid and I'm like, oh, I just can't do this anymore. I can't work. I struggle to focus. So yeah, it's really, really exciting. So yeah, thanks for coming on. Thanks for like telling me the story. Like this is a product like I'm pretty passionate about because it deals with, such an intense issue that I have in my family. And I hope that by creating this, some people will find it as well and will realize that there's a solution to their problem. Where can people go to check you out and to find out any information that you guys have, whether it be your product or, your educational stuff on night terrors?
Yeah, so they can go to lullysleep.com and we have a ton of information about the product. We're constantly creating more and more content about night terrors as well. So hopefully we'll be the go-to resource for education on night terrors soon.
Yeah, and I hope so too. I hope there's a lot of parents out there who can find a solution because we don't want them to have to deal with that.
Right.
All right. Thanks, Varun. I really appreciate you coming on, and I wish you the best with your company and, yeah, fixing sleep deprivation for parents.
Well, thanks again. And it was my pleasure sharing the story. And it's always really exciting to hear from parents and users of the product. So really appreciate you reaching out as well.
So I hope you enjoyed that interview, guys. If you have kids with night terrors or you want to check out Lully at all, go to lullysleep.com, Lully sleep.com, and you can check it out. And just so you know, they currently only ship the product to the US, and this was something that I had a problem with. They couldn't ship it out to Australia because I think they weren't sure about the compliance and stuff like that. So to get around this issue, what I did was I set up an account with, I think it's myus.com. Let me just go ahead and check that, myus.com. But basically, this is a US company that receives shipments on your behalf and then forwards it on to you. So obviously there's a bit of an extra cost there in order to get it shipped out to you, but you can purchase the Lully. MyUS gives you an address, and so you can give them the address, get it shipped out to you, and you can then get myus.com to forward it on to you. I think also Lully is now available on Amazon.com. I'm just going to check it for you. Amazon.com. Let me just check for you. Yeah, so Lully, it's called Lully Sleep Guardian, proven to stop night terrors. It's on Amazon.com for $129 at the moment. I think I paid like $169 plus all the postage, ended up being over $200 Australian for it, but it was absolutely worth it for me, and I totally recommend it if anyone has children who have night terrors. Absolutely 100% works, and yeah, I hope that you go ahead, check it out, and if you need it, go ahead and buy it. And if you don't need it, I hope that you enjoyed this episode nonetheless to learn about someone else's journey and how they came up with this idea.